Good morning. We are in our School of Ministry, and let's see, I will open us up with a word of prayer, and then we will get into our lesson. So, Heavenly Father, Lord, I just thank you and praise you, Lord, for another day that you have blessed us with. Lord, I thank you for waking us up this morning, giving us a mind and desire to want to come before you and study your word. Lord, I thank you for your grace and mercy that are new every morning. Lord, I thank you that you give us chances and opportunities and Lord, just to lift you up and glorify your name. So Lord, as we go through your scriptures this morning, I just ask you to open up my understanding and to help me to impart those meaningful and important things that we can take away and make, not just have knowledge, but that we can make changes in our lives so that we can want to do better and be better. And Lord, that we will be pleasing to you, and for most all, Lord, that we can live a life that's glorifying to you. So Lord, I just thank you and praise you, Lord, for the opportunity. And we just thank you in your son, Jesus' name, amen. All righty, so we are going to remove all this stuff. Get into our study, and we are in the book of Nehemiah. And we are going to be starting with the 11th chapter. And so, as always, I'd like to kind of take a look in the rearview mirror to see where we have been and where we have, before we can take off to where we are going. So, last week, in Nehemiah chapter 10, let me get all my papers together. So in chapter 10, the people, they're kind of winding up all of the things that they have been doing as far as building the wall and all that Nehemiah has led them to, and their spiritual revival. And so we have a roster of all those who signed their covenants. And so the Levites signed, the civic leaders, and they were making a covenant with God to say that they would, that they're accepting all the things that they had been learning when the book of Moses was open, and that they were going to obey his law, and that they were going to do whatever it took to stay in line with his word. And so they talked about, how they were going to handle their children and how they were going to be faithful to God in their business, and they were going to keep the Sabbath days and the special days. And they were going to be faithful in supporting the work of God, which meant the temple worship and all that entailed. And so the people seemingly, after coming out of exile, having their temple rebuilt, the walls that are now being fortified around the city, they were in the mindset of making changes. They were given an opportunity to be able to start over and to be the people that God had called them to be. And, when you think about it, God gives us an opportunity, every day that he gives us. It's a new beginning. So if we messed up the day before, when God gives us another chance, that we can get it right. And so in thinking about all that the people had gone through, God, God gives us a chance. And so we could have that spiritual revival in our own hearts. We can rebuild those spiritual walls around us. We can be more dedicated to the things of God and to the house of the Lord. Just because we don't see it right now, or things don't seem to be going right at this moment, each day, God, He gives us an opportunity. He gives us that chance, and this was their chance. And, what I can take away from it is that, let me kind of step back. The people of Israel went into exile because of their disobedience. And we can be disobedient to God and His word. But when we have an opportunity to make it right and get it right, then that's our chance for our spiritual revival. Amen. Okay, so in chapter 11, starting off with the first verse, it says, "Now the leaders of the people lived in Jerusalem, but the rest of the people cast lots to bring 1 out of 10 to live in Jerusalem, the holy city, while 9 tenths remained in the other city." So the city walls have been rebuilt. The spiritual revival has taken place. And so now it's time to bring the people. So at the time before all of this took place, Jerusalem was like a desolate land. All the people were taken away, and there were some people who stayed there, and most of the people there weren't Jews. And so now that they're coming back, and so in order to have a vibrant city and not just a ghost town, you actually have to have people who are living there. So when it says that they cast lots, they were kind of deciding who was going to actually live in the city and then who was going to stay like in the outskirts. So 1 out of every 10 person was allowed to come back into the city. And so they were going to be instrumental in rebuilding. So they had been gone 70 plus years. There hadn't been anybody living there. So they were going to have to start over. And remember when God promised them the land, He said, it was going to be a land of milk and honey. They were going to have houses that, they can just kind of move into. And so now they're going to have to actually go in and work. They're going to have to, plant vineyards and build houses. They're going to have to rebuild the city back up to its, the glorious place that it should be, because Jerusalem was the place where they felt that God had dwelt. And so now they were going to have to take a part in rebuilding it and getting it back to the city of David, to where it once was. So verse 2, "And the people blessed all the men who volunteered to live in Jerusalem." And so it was kind of an honor to be able to go back to live into the city. And so they had already decided, who the leaders were going to be, in government, the priest and all of those. So these were just going to be, I guess, like the average normal citizens. And they were willing to go. They were willing to leave to wherever they were and go there and start building. And they had nothing. And so it was going to take work.
I also think when you think about the fact that it was 1 out of 10 or 10%, that is really an exclusive club, in terms of people who are being entrusted to rebuild the city back up. And I think sometimes it shows, I guess, when there's a call on a person's life, not everyone is going to be called or have that gift to do what God is calling each of us to do. Because that is a very rare number. If you look at only 10% of the class pass the class, that's like a 90% denial rate. It really shows just how special these individuals are.
Yeah. And and you just think about the work that they had to do, and so, and they wanted to do it, it's, like you said, it's, a special group of people, but a lot of times people will volunteer to go in and do the easy part. They can say, oh, I'm a part of this group or whatever, and they have what is the word? I can't even think of the word, like a certain status, right? But even though I guess we could say it was a blessing for them to be a part, but they were going in there, like I said, to work. They had to go in there and build. So some of them, I don't know, may have been happy that they weren't picked to go, because they can just kind of go back to their life or their inhabitants. But these people were going to be the builders, the ones that was going to build up the city.
And that's kind of where it kind of goes back to that scripture, many are called, but few are chosen. And like you said, when you talk about the work of God, it would be easy just to sit back and be a parishioner. Like when you really think of one's life, or if you're in leadership on jobs, it's easy to sit back and just say, I don't want the responsibilities that come with some of these positions, but yeah, as you said, there's work to be done.
Not only that, just to have that mindset, like Deaconess Carrington was saying earlier on, that they blessed people, being was chosen to live with Jerusalem and do all the work. That's what it is. As you say, many are called, but few are chosen, but it's more than a cakewalk being chosen. It's more than a cakewalk. Well, it's more than a cakewalk, as you were saying. They blessed them that they were going to Jerusalem, but there was a work that had to be done. And as the pastor said, as we hear all the time, many are called, but few are chosen. But there is a work. It's not a cakewalk. When you're chosen, you're going to have to be made. You're going to have to endure. You're going to have to go through, so it's definitely going to be a personal sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. And just like we were talking yesterday, about growth. And I know we kind of said before, as when we read the Bible, we think things are happening instantaneously. But no, they didn't rebuild that wall overnight. Just think about it when you're doing some kind of project at your home, like redecorating or putting in new carpet. It might take a week or, months. I remember when I, redid my kitchen, they started on January 2nd, and they didn't finish. I remember the day they finished was the day they shut everything down for COVID. And so, you look at the finished product, but they just didn't come in there one day, knock down the walls and throw everything up. It's, takes time, preparations. You got to go step by step. And so, this has been a long process. And if you just think, even before God put it on Nehemiah's heart to go back and build the wall, Ezra was there, and he had to refurbish the temple. He, had to bring in all the priests and the Levites, and they had to all the holy things and reinstitute worship. So this had been years that have been gone by. And so now to rebuild the city, it's going to take a lot of time, years. So just like you said, it's not a cakewalk, and just even building a church, establishing a church, there's going to be a lot of, hard sweat, tears, and, all of that.
It even just brings realization to life when you stop and you think about California and all the, not just recent wildfires, but the fires they've had over the years up north, and talking about 9,000 structures or whatever damaged, probably even more than that. And It's definitely gonna take a while. It's gonna take dedication. Some people has already thrown in the towel, said they're not gonna come back. They're throwing in the towel, saying they're not coming back. They're going elsewhere. They're gonna leave California altogether because it's too difficult and too high and too expensive to even rent. So when you think about stuff like that, everybody, although they were chosen, everybody ain't ready to come back. Want to go back because they're gonna look at the overall picture and see that this is gonna take work, and I'm not willing to do it.
Yeah, and the cost of it, and not just a financial cost. It's just the physical and the mental, and all the thing that goes into it. And you figure, talking about the people in the fires, they lost everything. I mean, everything. Just imagine, one day you have a house full of stuff, more stuff than you probably need, clothes and shoes and things and all of that. And then tomorrow you have nothing. The only thing you have is what you possibly could carry out, when and fit in your car. And that's all the possessions that you have. And so when you talk about rebuilding, there's a whole emotional aspect to that. Do you really want to put in the time and the effort and energy and and everything that you have to go through? And it's never going to be the same as it was before the destruction. And just like the temple of God, it talked about what's, if you go back and read about how all of what Solomon put into it, the plans that he had, starting with David, and Solomon took on that project, and all the lavishness and the gold and all the ornate things, and it was destroyed. And yes, you can rebuild the structure, but it's never going to be how it was the same. Yeah.
Not only that, this is stuff, if you stop and think over the years,
I don't know if they can hear me.
not just that, if you stop and you think about even over the years and how things was when Solomon built the temple and all the, like you said, the golds and the rubies or whatever he used that God gave him, and that's what he elected to put in there. Even when you stop and you think with things, even if with how Jerusalem was, the material back then was stronger. They put more effort in building material as with now, you know what I'm saying? Or then it wasn't as strong or something that would held up. It's almost like, it's like a shell of what it used to, in most cases. It ended up being a shell of what it was. Even like when they have the houses here in San Bernardino, a lot of the houses on the outside, they look beautiful. I mean, tall, 2-3 stories of what it was before that fire. But if you open the door pretty hard, you got the whole, doorknob that flew through the door because they just building it's almost like a front. It look good, but is it really, quality?
Yeah. And then we have to think of, this is what, God had promised them. And God always keeps his word. It's we as a people who failed. And so, God is wanting quality from us. Right? He doesn't just want anything. He just doesn't want us to slap things together and, and have him be pleased. Because even when he gave directions on, how they were supposed to build the ark and how the garments that the priests wore, he was very specific on, how everything was supposed to be. And God always gives us his best, but can we say that we always give him our best?
Yeah, it was definitely, there's been some great dialogue as we've been hitting or touching on a lot of things. Some of the things that stood out to me is, when you're going through that building aspect, understanding, you were talking about the emotional, the emotional response, is that when God shows you something, not to grow frustrated or allow frustration to produce anger. And I think sometimes we can get angry at people. We can get angry at our situation based on our environment because we're not trusting God in the midst of rebuilding or building something to stand. And then just as we kind of talk about rebuilding and things that last, we talk about these oak trees and understanding that there are roots that are truly deep into the ground to solidify the tree so it's not easily broken or falls over. And I think when we're really talking about for God to help us build, it is we develop roots through adversity and conditions. So when we first moved into our house, the tree was still relatively new, so it was two like supporting, I guess you say, I don't know what you would call them,
Those wooden
stock
posts.
things, posts that was kind of tied around the tree while it was growing, but eventually the tree outgrew or outstripped those things that were next to it because it did not need that support anymore. And I think when we're truly have grown in our faith, it comes a time where we don't have to depend on other people to pray because we know to pray ourselves. We know to trust God and communicate with God ourselves because we have developed those deep roots.
Right. And as you were talking, and something came to mind, when you are a baby Christian or a new believer, we need that support. We need people to come stand along beside us until we get strong. But then once we get strong, then we need to be that support for someone else. So it should be, a continuous thing, right? As I think the pastor said it, you should have a mentor, but then you should also be mentoring someone else. And so that we're all growing, we're all getting stronger. You don't leave the weak behind. We have to hold up each other. And that's what makes us strong, and that's what makes the body of believers strong, right? Okay. Verse 3. Now these are the heads of the provinces who lived in Jerusalem, but in the cities of Judah, each lived in his own property in their cities. The Israelites, the priests, the Levites, the temple servants, and the descendants of Solomon's servants. Some of the sons of Judah and some of the sons of Benjamin lived in Jerusalem. From the sons of Judah, Athaiah, the son of Uzziah, the son of Zechariah, the son of Amariah, the son of Shephatiah, the son of Mahaliel, and the son of Perez. And so it goes on, and it lists, it's just a recording of all the names and the individuals of all those who are going to be living in the city. And this was a list of the tribal leaders of both Judah and Benjamin. So if you remember when the kingdom split, after Solomon, was it Jeroboam?
Yeah.
That his son? Yeah, it's Jeroboam. When the kingdom split, Judah and Benjamin stayed together, and all the other 10 tribes formed the other kingdom. And so now we see here that these two tribes, Judah and Benjamin, are still together. And so this was a list of of all aspects of the city: the military, the priests, the governments, the Levites, the gatekeepers, and the civil and royal servants. And so Nehemiah, he was, I guess, like the governor of the city. He still had to report to the king because remember, before he came, he was a cupbearer to the king, and so he allowed him the time to go and get Judah, Jerusalem, back together. So he was, I guess, the governmental leader, but then they had like all the spiritual leaders and I guess the servicemen, or the people who would would, I guess, just like a governmental body. You have your governors and your mayors and your all the people, and so these were those people. And so from verse 3 all the way to verse 24 is just a list of all of those individuals. And so to save me from butchering the names, I won't try to read them. But it says that out of all the Levites in the city, there were 284, and then the gatekeepers who kept watch of the gates, there was 172 of them. So they were, off to a good start in their rebuilding. I'll read verse 20. And it says, the rest of Israel, of the priests and the Levites, were in all the cities of Judah, each on its own inheritance. So remember, when the Levites, they didn't get a portion of land. They were put into the cities because they were supposed to be like the spiritual leaders. And so they were taken care of by the people when they, with their crops and their cattle. So that's how they were taken care of. It says, but the temple servants were living in Ophel and Zihah and Gishpa, and they were in charge of the temple servants. Now the overseer of the Levites in Jerusalem was Uzzi, the son of Bani, the son of Hashabiah, the son of Mattaniah, the son of Micah, from the sons of Aspah, who were the singers for the service of the house of God. For there was a commandment from the king concerning them, and a firm regulation of the song leaders day by day. And when they talk about the king, it was King David, going all the way back to him, because when he set up, when the temple, the temple wasn't built when he was alive, but David was a song leader. He played the harp, and so he set the regulations on how the song leaders were going, what their duties were. Let's see.
And that was verse 3.
Yeah, from verse 3. Oh, that was from 23. Yeah. And so verses 25. It says, now as for the villages with their fields, some of the sons of Judah lived in Kirith Arba and its towns, in Dibon and its towns, in Jekabbezel and its villages. So these are all the towns outside of Jerusalem. So it would be like, we live in San Bernardino County, but you have Fontana in Rialto, in Colton, in Rancho, they're all part of the same county, but they're, different cities. And so these were all the individuals that lived in the surrounding towns. And so they had leaders from both Judah and Benjamin, and Nehemiah recorded all the names of the people who would return to the city and that God had promised him. So this was just, kind of, documentation that these were the people who agreed to come back and live there and to rebuild it. And so that's all of chapter 11. And moving into chapter 12, it says, now these are the priests and the Levites who came up with Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua. And so again, here's like all of these names, just the recording. I know, I just butcher them. And so, they were actually brought from exile. Zerubbabel actually gathered up the Levites and brought them back into the city. And so part of the being a Levite and the chief priest, they had to be a descendant from Moses and Aaron, because those were that was part of Israel that was took over for the sacrifices and the prayer and all of that. And so going on, moving up to verse 22 in chapter 12, and it says, "As for the Levites, the heads of the fathers' households were registered in the days of Elishib, Joiada, Johan, and Jaddua. So were the priests in the reign of Darius the Persian." And so again, this is just a recording of all of those individuals who were being brought back into the city in order to establish, all of the worship and the spiritual things. Because for the most part, when God called them to be a people group and a nation, but they were also supposed to, they were to be holy and to worship. And so that was a big part of, I guess, their community per se. And so, so the priests were very instrumental on how they conducted themselves and how they lived their lives, because that was their connection to God per se, with the prayer and the temple worship and all of the sacrifices. That was their connection. And so they kept records of all the names of the families that they belonged to. And again, they had to be descendants of Moses and Aaron, and they were in charge of all of the temple worship. And that's pretty much, let's see.
I think when you get to 27, it kind of, I guess, talking about the.
All the names. Yeah. So now they're going to dedicate the wall. And so it says, "Now at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites from all of their places to bring them to Jerusalem, so that they might celebrate the dedication with gladness, with hymns of thanksgiving, and with songs, to the accompaniment of cymbals, harps, and lyres." So now's the time for their celebration. They're, dedicating it. It would just be like if we built a new church and we're going to dedicate this sanctuary, and we're going to invite everyone to come in, different leaders, prominent people, other ministries to come in and celebrate with us. And that's what they were doing. And so they had, everybody in place, and, with the singing and everything. And 28, it says, "So the sons of the singers were assembled from the district around Jerusalem and from the villages of the Netophites." And so they, I guess, actually recruited a big choir from all the surrounding cities for them to come in and to sing and to worship. And so it says they came from Beth Gilgal and from their fields in Geba and Asmavah, for the singers had built themselves villages around Jerusalem. The priests and the Levites purified themselves, and they also purified the people, the gates, and the walls. So they were, in order for them to perform their duties, there was a purification process that had to take place. And so the priests purified themselves, the Levites, and all the people who were being involved. So they were, I guess, sort of spiritually clean, so they could be a part of this worship. And then verse 31, it says, "Then I had the leaders of Judah come up on top of the wall, and I appointed 2 great choirs, the first proceeding to the right on top of the wall toward the refuse gate, Hoshai, and half the leaders of Judah followed them." So they were actually standing on this wall, these choirs, and they were singing with Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, Jeremiah, and some of the sons of the priests with trumpets, and Zechariah, the son of Jonathan, the son of Shemaiah, the son of Mattaniah, the son of Micaiah, the son of Zachor, and the son of Asbah, and his kingsmen, Shemaiah, Azarel, again, all of the names of these people. And so they were at the gates. It says, "At the fountain gate, they went up the steps to the city of David by the stairway of the wall above the house of David to the water gate on the east." So just imagine, and that was just one side. And so then it said the second choir was to the left. And they followed them to that side of the wall. So this was like a huge deal as far as, all the things that they were doing. And then they had all the gates, the gatekeepers and the gate cards. And so the 2 choirs were there, and they were there, and it said they stood in the house of God, and so did I, and half the officials with me, and the priest and the singers with him. And on that day they offered great sacrifices and rejoiced because God had given them great joy. Even the women and the children rejoiced, so that the joy of Jerusalem was heard from afar. And on that day men were also appointed over the chambers for the stores, the contributions, the first fruits, and the tithes, to gather them into the fields of the cities, the portions required by the law for the priests of the Levites. For Judah rejoiced over the priests and Levites who served. And they performed worship to their God and the service of purification, together with the singers and the gatekeepers, in accordance with the command of David and his son Solomon. For in the days of David and Ashpa in ancient times, there were leaders of singers, songs of praise, and hymns of thanksgiving to God. So all Israel in the days of Zerubbabel and Nehemiah gave portions due the singers and the gatekeepers, as each day required, and set apart the consecrated portion for the Levites, and the Levites set apart the consecrated portion for the sons of Aaron. So they were basically going back to the time of David and everything that he had instituted, and that everything God had instituted, as far as the worship, as far as the sacrifices, as far as, being consecrated, prayers for the people, all of this. And it was somewhat new to them because, they had kind of walked away from God in a sense, or backslid, and then they had been taken away, and so they weren't allowed to worship as they had been or should have been. And so now they're, coming back. And so I kind of think of it as if, say you grew up in church, or your parents were saved and they brought you to church, and then you get to a certain age and you just walk away and you go about, life, doing, what you do. But at some point, maybe you have a family and you have children, and God, through circumstances of life, and you realize that you need to get back into fellowship. You need to recommit your life, and not just you, but your children, or maybe your children's children, who don't have any life knowledge of what it is to serve God. And so it's all new. So you're coming back to God, and you're worshiping, and with your family. And this is how they were coming together, rebuilding, and, trying to be the people that God had called them to be. And so, and it was a big celebration. They had committed, their time and energy to the work, and now they're committing their the spiritual aspect of their lives. So, that was kind of a lot. Any thoughts, comments?
It was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot, but I guess it's good to see how everything took place. How they were able to come together and rebuild. And it wasn't just haphazard. It seemed like to me that it was real, as you said earlier, it was a real plan on how to get the job done and complete.
Yeah, so, and this was a big undertaking for Nehemiah, just think, when God puts a idea or a vision, how, and I remember, and this was, some years ago, and then I was praying, Lord, what do you want me to do? What is my not ministry, I didn't think in the terms of ministry, but how you want to do something, for the work of the Lord, and where's, my direction. And it was kind of funny, because I remember I was out, it was like in the evening, and I was out running. We were, it was a group of us, and I had fallen, had tripped over the curb or something like that. And my group leader from the Bible study that I participated, or the teaching leader, she had called me, and like I said, I had been praying, God, what would you have me to do? And she called me, and she asked me if I wanted to be in leadership. And then I just remember my leg was hurting so bad. First, I was shocked that she would even ask, and I was like, you know what, I can't talk to you right now. I said, I'll call you later. And then I was thinking, oh my God, why would she ask me? I don't want to do that, and whatever. But then it came to my mind, well, you've been praying about, what would you have me to do? And so I was like, well, yeah, but I wasn't thinking that. And it's funny because we can pray and ask God, to lead us or guide us, or if we're having, a situation, or we're, asking, how am I going to get out of this? Or Lord, I need your help, or whatever. And he'll give us the answer. And then we was like, well, no, that's
Right.
that's
God.
You really don't want him to do it. You want him to let you do it the way you want to do it, when you want to do it.
yeah. And then when he tells us, he's like, no, that's not what I was thinking. But then why pray? Why pray and ask God, for answers? And then when he give us the answers, because it's not in how we would handle it. And so,
You're like, get thee behind you.
and knowing it's the voice of God. So, I see this is, where they are. God has, given them the ability to rebuild and to re-sanctify themselves. But we'll see, how long, is this revival gonna last? It's just like when you go away to a conference or something, and you come back all energized and really on fire for God. But then after a while, it's sort of like the fire kind of dampens out. But who dampens the fire? Who puts it out? It's not God. But, we just kind of get back to our status quo and, get back to doing the things as we were before. And so that flame kind of dwindles out. And so at this point, the people are, they're excited. They're all in, and they're, wanting to rebuild and worship. Let's see. So moving into chapter 13, and we'll do a little bit before we close out. And so this is the last chapter in Nehemiah. And so verse 13, on that day they read aloud from the book of Moses in the hearing of the people, and there was found written in it that no Ammonite or Moabite should ever enter the assembly of God. So remember, when they were taken away, there were people, who were there, or people who came in and claimed that land that weren't, that were considered foreigners. And so now they're reading in the book of Moses that the Ammonites and the Moabites shouldn't enter the assembly of God because they weren't part of, they weren't the Jews, they weren't Israel, they weren't part of, God's people. And 2, because they did not meet the sons of Israel with bread and water, but hired Balaam against them to curse them. However, our God turned the curse into a blessing. So this is going back to when Balaam wanted, I forget the king's name, but he wanted Balaam to go and curse the people, and he kept blessing them. And so this was, these people, the Ammonites and the Moabites, they didn't accept, they didn't want to be a part of God's people. And so even then, they called them, I can't think of the, Ramble, I think that's the name of it. But those were people who weren't part of Judah, who kind of became part of the community, but they accepted their ways and they accepted their worship. And the Ammonites and the Moabites didn't. So they were in effect cursed. And so when they heard the law, they excluded all foreigners from Israel. So they were like, okay, we're, you can't be a part of us. And so they kicked him out. And so remember when, I think it was Saul, when God told him, when they were warring, and he told them to go in and, they were supposed to destroy the nation and kill all the people. And he told him, not just, kill all the people, but destroy all of their things, their cattle and their sheep. He said, don't leave anything standing. And he was disobedient because he, I think he didn't kill the king, and then he took the spoil, as, a treasure. And that caused him to be, God rejected him as king. And so if he had done what God had told him to do, some of these people wouldn't even be around, but it was through his disobedience and ended up, causing him his kingdom. So we will stop right there and we'll pick up in verse 4, and next week we probably should be able to finish chapter 13 and move on. Oh, yeah, 2 weeks. 3 weeks. And then we'll pick up and we'll finish out the book of Nehemiah.
Amen.
All right,
That's a great
amen.
lesson.
Ah.
Oh, man. Thank God for Deaconess Carrington for doing such an awesome job in talking and discussing Nehemiah. Oh, we got a haircut. Oh, anyway, I'm here for our School of Ministry offering. So if you would like to give, please come at this time. And you could also give digitally. Information is in the description, which would be Givelify, Cash App, Venmo. Please give. I guess Yvette going.